Best native sedges and rushes for riprap shorelines. Those rocks may look permanent, but take a closer look. Between them are hundreds of small openings where runoff can carry soil away. Invasive weeds can take hold, disturbing the shoreline. The top picture shows a shoreline covered in bare gray riprap. On the row below, there's close-ups of hot rocks, exposed soil washing through gaps, and waves striking the bank. Now imagine those same spaces filled with carefully selected native sedges and rushes. Their stems slow the moving water. Their roots occupy loose soil between the rocks, and their foliage softens the appearance of the riprap, and the plants create shelter for insects, amphibians, birds, and other shoreline wildlife. But there is a catch. You cannot simply buy a tray of random wetland plants, push them between the rocks, and expect them to survive. The right plant depends on three things: your climate, the amount of salt in the water, and the exact elevation of the planting pocket. So why does bare riprap fails? You must evaluate whether you have fresh, brackish, or saltwater, full sun or shade, what the wave and current exposure is, ice movement, water level fluctuation, soil trapped between rocks, and access for establishment watering. In this video, we will divide the shoreline into freshwater, brackish, and saltwater environments. Then we will identify promising native sedges and rushes for different climate regions, explain how to install them in riprap, and reveal the mistakes that cause many shoreline plantings to fail. First thing you want to do is read the shoreline. Before selecting a species, stop thinking of the riprap as one uniform planting bed. It's actually a series of moisture zones. At the bottom is a regularly inundated zone. These rocks may remain underwater for long periods or be covered during every tide. Above that is the splash or fluctuation zone. It is repeatedly flooded and exposed. Next comes the moist upper bank, where plant roots can reach moisture, but the ground is not continuously submerged. Finally, there is the dry transition zone connecting the shoreline to the upland landscape. A species adapted to the upper bank may rot or drown if planted too low. A plant adapted to regular flooding may dry out if installed near the top. Sun exposure matters too. Dark riprap can become extremely hot in full sun. A plant may have wet roots while its leaves experience intense reflected heat. Shade-tolerant woodland sedges are usually poor choices for exposed lower riprap, even when they are native to the surrounding region. So you must also evaluate fresh, brackish, or saltwater, full sun or shade, wave and current exposure, ice movement, water level fluctuation, soil trapped between rocks, and access for establishment watering. Doesn't that sound like you heard it again? So for freshwater lakes and streams, native aquatic vegetation is often preferred where site conditions allow it. Riprap is generally used where vegetation alone cannot provide adequate protection, and plants may then be integrated with or placed around the rock structure. So you want to match the plants to the water. There are three types of water: fresh water, usually found in a lake or river environment; brackish water, which is where the fresh water meets the salt water and becomes somewhere in between; and then the saltwater, which you find in the oceans and seas, a tidal marsh environment. Notice the plants are different in each of those environments. So we're going to match plants to water. We'll begin with freshwater lakes, ponds, reservoirs, and riverbanks. For cool northern climates, including parts of the Great Lakes, Northeast, and Upper Midwest, possible candidates include fox sedge, lake sedge, tussock sedge, woolgrass, soft rush, and hardstem or softstem bulrush. Fox sedge, or Carex vulpinoidea, is frequently used in wet meadows, drainage areas, and periodically flooded soil. Its dense grass-like growth can be useful in moist upper riprap pockets. Lake sedge and tussock sedge are more appropriate where persistent moisture is available. They can form substantial root masses, but their mature size must be considered before placing them near docks, pathways, or narrow access areas. Soft rush is widely distributed and visually distinctive with upright cylindrical stems. It works best in consistently moist or shallowly flooded zones, depending on the local ecotype. Woolgrass, commonly classified as Scirpus cyprinus, is not a true grass despite its common name. It can add height and strong visual texture in wet freshwater settings. For warmer southeastern freshwater shorelines, soft rush may remain useful, but the locally native variety or ecotype should be selected. Other possibilities can include certain spike rushes, bulrushes, and regionally native sedges adapted to floodplain or wet meadow conditions. For the Mountain West, examine regionally appropriate plants such as Baltic rush, Nebraska sedge, beaked sedge, and locally native bulrushes. These plants may tolerate periodic flooding, but western sites can differ dramatically in elevation, soil alkalinity, summer drought, and winter ice. In the Pacific Northwest, candidates may include sluice sedge, small fruited bulrush, common spike rush, and locally native rushes. Again, select from regional restoration lists rather than relying on a national common name. Federal restoration projects regularly use native sedges and rushes to reestablish wetland communities, provide root cohesion, reduce erosion, and restore habitat. However, the plant palette must reflect local hydrology and the native plant community. These are starting points, not a universal prescription. Some species have enormous geographic ranges, while others are native only in certain counties or watersheds. Use your state natural resources agency, University Extension Service, Native Plant Society, or Natural Resources Conservation Service Office to verify local status. Brackish water is where plant selection becomes more challenging. Estuaries, tidal creeks, coastal lagoons, and river mouths may change salinity during storms, droughts, high tides, or heavy rainfall. A plant might survive freshwater flooding but fail after repeated salt exposure. In the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, possible brackish zone plants include salt meadow cordgrass, saltgrass, blackgrass, certain bulrushes, and salt-tolerant rushes. In lower energy areas, smooth cordgrass may occupy the lower regularly flooded edge, while salt meadow species occupy higher elevations. Along the southeast and Gulf Coast, black needlerush is a major candidate for upper intertidal and brackish conditions where it is locally native. Soft rush may occur farther inland or where salinity is lower and less persistent. California and parts of the Pacific Coast require an entirely different regional palette. Baltic rush, creeping walleye, saltgrass, Pacific or regional bulrushes, and locally native sedges may be considered according to salinity and tidal elevation. The key lesson is that brackish shorelines should be treated as a gradient. Do not plant one species from the waterline to the top of the bank. Create bands. Use the most flood and salt-tolerant plants lower down. Place moderately salt-tolerant sedges and rushes in the middle, and use less salt-tolerant transition plants at the upper edge. Saltwater sites require true coastal plants. On the Atlantic and Gulf Coast, smooth cordgrass is commonly associated with lower tidal elevations. Salt meadow cordgrass, saltgrass, and black needlerush may occupy higher or less frequently flooded zones, depending on region. Although cordgrasses are grasses rather than sedges or rushes, excluding them from a saltwater design would overlook some of the most important native marsh plants. On protected Pacific coast shorelines, native saltgrass, pickleweed, Baltic rush, and regionally native bulrushes or sedges may be appropriate. Pacific tidal systems must be designed using local reference marshes because elevation tolerances can be extremely specific. Vegetated shoreline approaches are generally best suited to lower moderate energy settings. High energy open coasts, navigation channels, steep banks, and sites exposed to strong boat wakes may require engineered or hybrid stabilization. You want to plant between rocks. Once the species and elevation are correct, installation determines whether the planting succeeds. First, identify stable openings in the riprap. Do not loosen structural stones or dig beneath the designed rock layer. The goal is to use existing interstitial spaces or planting pockets intentionally incorporated into the shoreline design. Second, confirm that the opening contains enough suitable growing medium to support roots. A tiny crack filled only with loose gravel would dry too quickly. A deep pocket containing moist mineral soil provides a better opportunity. Third, use plugs rather than scattering seed directly over exposed rock. A developed root plug is easier to anchor, less likely to wash away, and better able to compete during establishment. Place the crown at the correct elevation. Do not bury the center of the sedge or rush deeply beneath sediment. Firm the soil around the plug and use biodegradable quad fiber where necessary to prevent the growing medium from washing out. Avoid materials that can trap wildlife or persist as plastic debris. Plant in irregular clusters rather than evenly spaced decorative rows. Natural-looking groups provide stronger visual impact and may create overlapping root zones as the plants expand. During the first growing season, provide supplemental water whenever the planting pocket is not naturally moist. Inspect after storms, high water events, ice movement, and heavy boat traffic. Replace dislodged plants quickly before the exposed soil disappears from pocket. Here is another infogram on how to install a native sedge plug in riprap. Small steps, strong roots, healthier shores. So step 1, locate a stable pocket. Inspect the growing medium. Insert the rooted plug, position the crown correctly, and secure soil with biodegradable coir. Avoid costly mistakes. Here are 5 mistakes that can turn a promising shoreline project into an expensive failure. Mistake number 1, choosing plants only by appearance. A beautiful nursery sedge may have no tolerance for flooding, reflected heat, salt, or wave action. Mistake number 2, ignoring exact elevation. Moving a plant only 12 inches higher or lower can completely change its moisture and flooding conditions. Mistake number 3, using species that are native somewhere in the country but not native to your region. The word native must be connected to a geographic area. Mistake number 4, planting into an actively failing structure. Vegetation cannot repair collapsing riprap, severe toe erosion, unstable soil, or stones that are improperly sized for the wave environment. Mistake number 5, failing to monitor the site. Even a well-designed planting may need replacement plugs, invasive plant removal, sediment adjustment, wildlife protection, or changes after an unusually high water season. The winning approach is not to search for one miracle plant. It is to create a small community of native species matched to the shoreline's climate, salinity, elevation, soil, sunlight, and energy. Do that correctly, and the spaces between the rocks stop looking empty. They become living parts of the shoreline. Before planting, consult your local extension office, state environmental agency, conservation district, or qualified shoreline professional. Work below the ordinary high water line or within tidal and wetland areas may require permits. So comment below with your state or coastal region and tell us whether your shoreline is freshwater, brackish, or saltwater. And subscribe for more practical videos about shoreline stabilization, dock protection, erosion control, and waterfront maintenance. If you would like a blog from this video, message PJ with the title at this email address. The title is Best Native Sedges and Rushes for Riprap Shorelines. Please like, subscribe, and comment.